So tonight, I'm proposing specific steps to pay for the $1 trillion that it took to rescue the economy last year. Starting in 2011, we are prepared to freeze government spending for 3 years. Spending related to our national security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security will not be affected. But all other discretionary government programs will. Like any cash-strapped family, we will work within a budget to invest in what we need and sacrifice what we don't. I know that some in my own party will argue that we can't address the deficit or freeze government spending when so many are still hurting. And I agree, which is why this freeze won't take effect until next year, when the economy is stronger. That's how budgeting works.
Welcome to the America 20XY Week in Review. Today is Thursday, January the 28th, 2010. I am your host, Andrew Steele. Well, I have a lot of catching up to do this week, so I'm going to jump right in. Our first article is on America20XY.com under the headline, Wall Street Journal reports, Bruce Ivins can't be the 2001 Anthrax killer. Attacks remain unsolved. Now, if you go to the America20XY.com, I have the full Wall Street Journal report there. It's very long and very detailed, so for the purpose of being concise, we're going to stick to a blog on this written by Tina Redlip on BioPrep Watch on January 28th. In an article written by Edward Epstein in the Wall Street Journal's opinion section, Epstein has claimed that Bruce Ivins, long thought to be the source of the 2001 American anthrax attacks, was not guilty. Epstein notes that the anthrax used in the attacks had silicone in it, which was used in the 1960s to weaponize anthrax. Siliconized anthrax vaporizes into the air, which is what happened when the letters sent to Senators Leahy and Daschle were opened. This means, Epstein posits, that the anthrax sent to the senators had silicone added to it. This was a common practice to weaponize silicon in the 1960s, wherein anthrax spores were coated with silicon. After international treaties banned the weaponizing of anthrax, research anthrax was no longer coated. Ivins, Epstein says, would not have had the skills or the means to siliconize anthrax spores, a process, he says, would have required highly specialized equipment that was not available in Ivins' Fort Detrick lab or anywhere on the facility. I don't think there's anyone there who would have had the foggiest idea how to do it, Richard Spurzel, a former biodefense scientist working with Ivins, said in a private briefing. The FBI said that traces of silicone in the 2001 attacks could have been absorbed naturally from water and nutrients in which they were grown, though no such nutrients were found in Ivins' lab. An FBI lab report from April 17th reported that 1.4% of the anthrax in Leahy letter was silicone, a number that is common when anthrax is weaponized, but not from accidental contamination. 56 subsequent tests to prove that anthrax could accidentally absorb silicone performed by scientists at the Lawrence Livermore National Labs in California were performed without success. The results for accidental exposure were as low as 0.001%. The FBI's investigation into the attacks remains open, though it will not comment on specifics. Our next article, it was on theendrun.com on January 28th. ABC News say feds quietly attempting to ID Mutalab's handler, whose existence they've refused to acknowledge for past month. Buried at the very end of a two-page article published on ABC News on January 22nd, 2010 is this quote. Federal agents also tell ABCNews.com they are attempting to identify a man who passengers said helped Abdul Mutalab change planes for Detroit when he landed in Amsterdam from Lagos, Nigeria. Authorities had initially discounted the passenger accounts, but the agents say there is a growing belief the man may have played a role to make sure Abdul Mutalab did not get cold feet. In the comments section of the article, the following comment appears, which was ostensibly written by Flight 253 passenger Kurt Haskell. This is Kurt H., Flight 253 passenger. I find it really interesting that this article supports my story that the media has discredited for weeks. Specifically, I'm referring to my account that an Indian man, quote, sharp-dressed man helped Muttalib on Flight 253. The official version since early January has been that over 200 hours of security video have been reviewed and show nothing. This media account has been very irritating to me, as I know what I saw, and yet I was immediately discredited. We now have a retraction from the official story. Too bad ABC chose to bury this story in a somewhat unrelated story. It should be front-page news. How about an apology, ABC? While I can't 100% verify that this comment, which was posted by the user Haskell Law, was actually written by the lawyer Kurt Haskell, it most likely was, especially since Kurt's wife Lori Haskell has written a similar response on her blog. Now we have an article from the Times Online on January the 27th, written by Francis Gibbs. Confidential documents on death of Dr. David Kelly to be released. Confidential medical evidence about the death of Dr. David Kelly, the expert in biological warfare, is to be released. Lord Hutton, the retired law lord who chaired the inquiry into Dr. Kelly's death, has indicated that he will release a group of doctors the medical records and results of the post-mortem examination that have to date remained unpublished. His 2004 report, commissioned by Tony Blair, concluded that Dr. Kelly killed himself by cutting his wrist with a blunt gardening knife. It was reported at the weekend that the medical reports, including the post-mortem examination findings by Dr. Nicholas Hunt, a pathologist, and also photographs of Dr. Kelly's body, are to remain classified for 70 years. There was also a 30-year ban on publication of records provided to the inquiry, but not produced in evidence. The restriction on publication were notified to a group of doctors who are challenging the Hutton verdict, arguing the evidence does not support suicide. Last year, they published a medical dossier that Lord Hutton's conclusion that Dr. Kelly killed himself by severing the ulnar artery in his left wrist after taking an overdose of prescription painkillers was untenable because the artery is small and hard to access, and severing it would not in any case cause death. And if you want to know more about Dr. Kelly and why that's important and how that has to do with the run-up to the Iraq War and the politics involved there, Google his name and you'll get a very interesting story. Now, we have an article from FP Magazine on January 27th. CIA man retracts claim that waterboarding resulted in success. Well, it's official now. John Kiriakou, the former CIA operative who affirmed claims that waterboarding quickly unloosed the tongues of hardcore terrorists, says he didn't know what he was talking about. Kiriakou, a 15-year veteran of the agency's Intelligence Analysis and Operations Directorate, electrified the hand-wringing national debate over torture in December of 2007 when he told ABC's Brian Ross and Richard Esposito in a much ballyhooed exclusive interview that senior al-Qaeda commando Abdul Zubaydah cracked after only one application of the face cloth in water. From that day on, he answered every question, Kiriakou said. The thread of information he provided disrupted a number of attacks, maybe dozens of attacks. No matter that Kiriakou wearily said he shared the anguish of millions of Americans, not to mention the rest of the world, over the CIA's application of the medieval confession technique. The point was that it worked, and the pro-torture camp was quick to pick up on Kiriakou's claim. Now comes John Kiriakou again with a wholly different story. On the next-to-last page of a new memoir, The Reluctant Spy, My Secret Life in the CIA's War on Terror, Kiriakou now rather offhandedly admits that he basically made it all up. What I told Brian Ross in late 2007 was wrong on a couple of accounts. He writes, I suggested that Abdul Zubaydah had lasted only 30 or 35 seconds during his waterboarding before he begged his interrogators to stop. After that, I said he opened up and gave the agency actionable intelligence. But never mind, he says now, I wasn't there when the interrogation took place. Instead, I relied on what I'd heard and read inside the agency at the time. In a word, it was hearsay, water cooler talk. Now we know, Kiriakou goes on, that Zubaydah was waterboarded 83 times in a single month, raising questions about how much useful information he actually supplied. Indeed, but after his one-paragraph confession, Kiriakou adds that he didn't have any first-hand knowledge of anything relating to CIA torture routines, and still doesn't. And he claims that the disinformation he helped spread was a CIA dirty trick. In retrospect, it was a valuable lesson in how the CIA uses the fine arts of deception even among its own.